Welcome to the Trauma Overhaul Podcast. My name is Tiffany Singleton,
And I'm Aliyah Simon.
and today we're going to be talking about boundaries.
Ooh.
What are healthy boundaries, and how do we set them when it comes to ourselves and our relationships?
All right now.
All right.
Let's flow.
That's right. Well, boundaries, that's a really, really big thing when we're
Mhm.
talking about relationships, period. And when it
Yes.
comes to us protecting our peace. I know
Mhm.
peace is the watchword for a lot of people this year, saying,
Yes.
I just need peace in my life.
Yes.
Okay. But sometimes we cannot actually achieve that because we have not set proper boundaries with others or for ourselves for that matter.
Come on.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
big on that peace thing.
No,
But you can't have peace if you chaotic.
Oh.
So let's talk about what boundaries
Better
are.
say so.
Come on now.
All right. So let's start out with our definition. So boundary, just in simple terms, is any guidelines or any beliefs that we have set for ourselves that allows for us to remain safe in our emotional spaces, mentally, physically, intellectually, sexually, materially. So all the different categories of our lives, having those boundaries allow us to feel like we're in a safe space.
All right now.
Right.
So you just went through like a bunch of different boundaries.
Yeah,
I was gonna ask
It's
you
a
about
lot.
what types of boundaries
It's a
are
lot.
there. Can you give like an example of like how about a boundary with yourself?
Okay, let's start out with definition first. Again, it's another category, which are internal and external boundaries. So, our internal boundary can be a boundary that I have set for myself. So, that can be just for instance, how many times will I exercise a week? What would that look like? What is that guideline for me? What is the belief of what is enough for me to meet my goal within this particular season? So, an external boundary can be how do I treat myself and how do I allow others to treat me and how do I treat others? So, when I say external boundaries, so that's what we're talking about as far as being able to have guidelines for managing interactions and relationships with others.
So I just got a question here.
Okay.
So when I'm creating a boundary,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And it has to do with someone outside of me, right?
Mhm.
What is that about? Like, how do I react to that boundary? Or how does the other person react to that boundary? How do you plan that boundary? Like, how does that work? Because, in my understanding,
Mhm.
when we create a boundary, it is not about what the other person does, except for if they cross this boundary, this is what I'm going to do because we don't control anybody else.
Mhm.
So, like, if you can break down like an example of like setting a boundary in relationships,
Mhm.
whether it's friendships, dating, whatever, setting a boundary and how that looks.
So we're just going to go with simplistic terms. So let's say that there is one type of boundary that could be a time boundary. And this is really good because this impacts a lot of families where we may have a family member that wants all of somebody else's time. Let's say that I feel like I need some time for self care. I just want to be alone just for a few minutes every day. But one of my siblings want to talk to me all day, every day. So when I said, hey, I'm not available to talk today at 5 o'clock, that person may get upset.
Mm.
So setting that boundary is being able to say, I enjoyed the conversations that we have. I do value our relationship, but I need 2 hours a day for that self care. And during that time, I would like to be alone, right? Without any type of interaction. So that can be an example of a time boundary. Another boundary could be a material boundary. Let's say that you just met a total stranger and they said, hey, you think I could borrow your car tonight? Well, you laugh, but there are some people that may let that person borrow their car and they've only known them for about 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
In that instance, this person does not have a material boundary. So having one in place that's healthy is being able to identify when, with whom, and why should I share material possessions or material things. So that is how you set those boundaries, is determine what is appropriate for the situation.
Mm. Tell me how trauma affects boundaries.
When we have trauma in place, so there are underlying things that can cause us not to be able to set a boundary. And that can be things such as shame, that can be guilt, that can be rejection, which is a really big thing. Because now when we talk about a fear of rejection and that's just an intense desire for people to want us,
Yeah.
to want to be around us, to love on us, right? That is big in those situations because now we have something that's coming into play, which is people pleasing,
Mhm.
right? When we exhibit people pleasing behaviors, or we feel like we just have the inability to say no
Mm.
in situations where we should be saying no, then that keeps us from being able to set healthy boundaries. Why? Because the boundary would almost force us or dictate for us to be able to say no in those situations. But if we don't have that in place, then what happens? We overextend ourselves.
Yes.
We become exhausted.
Yes.
We take on things that we don't need to take on.
Mhm.
And then it just leads to extreme burnout. But then the funny thing is, then we're upset with everybody
Everybody else.
else
Yes.
when we've
Yes.
taken
When
on all of the burden
Mhm.
because of all of these underlying things.
Right.
When nobody said, hey, do this for me. Hey, do that for me. We've taken that on because of that people pleasing behavior.
Yes.
So those are some things that can stop us from setting healthy boundaries.
Mm.
In therapy, a lot I hear the most common thing said is, well, I don't want them to be upset with me,
Yes.
or they're going to be mad with me. As we talked about in the previous episode, was like a limiting belief,
Mm.
right? That might be existing that may need to be reversed or just totally done away with to correct how we see relationships in a healthy way
Right.
so that we can respond appropriately in
Mhm.
those situations without feeling like we're being taken advantage of.
Right. And then you can have that extreme
Mhm,
where people have such rigid boundaries that it
mhm,
keeps them from even
mhm,
experiencing great relationships
mhm,
and great anything
mhm,
out of life because it's like if you do anything, if you cross any boundary, my boundary is right here, this thin little line that you don't even know about. And
mhm,
if you cross it, then I'm done with you or I'm done with myself.
mhm.
Because you talked about having boundaries within yourself, the exercise and the other things that you talked about. So like even with exercising, if I don't get it perfectly right for this week, then I'm just gonna stop.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
that's like that crossing that boundary, not
mhm.
being able to fulfill something and then just walking away from it because your boundaries are so rigid that you can't even, there's um no balance in it, or it's so stringent that there's no opportunity for even mistakes because people do make mistakes and sometimes people don't always know what your boundaries are.
Right.
And if you're not open and talking to that person, I'm talking about relationships and things
Mhm,
that you're even open with yourself,
mhm.
then crossing those boundaries could be something that, like again, I just said, keeping you from experiencing a great relationship.
Right. There are different it's so many categories of boundaries, but our main ones are we have physical boundaries,
Mhm.
we have intellectual, we have emotional boundaries, we have material, and we have time.
Mhm.
And so those are our main categories of boundaries that we have to set in place so that we can establish and maintain healthy relationships. Now, going back to talking about having the rigid boundaries, so based on those categories, there are three different types. They can be rigid, They can be porous or they can be healthy. So when we have a rigid boundary, and so oftentimes that's going to be tied to us having issues of trust.
Yes. Come on now.
Issues of trust, issues of feeling disrespected.
Mhm.
Now I'm closing off. I'm not going
Yes.
to talk to anybody.
Mhm.
Right? And don't try to ask me anything because I'm not sharing with you.
Yes.
And matter of fact, I'm not even going to ask you for what I need.
Yes.
Right? And so that,
Stop talking about me.
right? Right? And so, but it's a real thing.
Yeah.
It does exist.
Yes.
And then we have that porous boundary where we all know people who overshare everything.
Yes.
Right? You can meet a total stranger and you will tell them every single detail of your life, and they're just sitting there like, wow, whoa.
Mhm.
Down to your blood type. They know everything within about an hour.
Right.
Right? And so that's the porous boundary. And it really doesn't even have to be with a stranger. Sometimes we can overshare with family members and close friends.
Right.
So, how do we adjust that? Is being able to identify one, a need to share.
Mhm.
Why are we sharing? And is it appropriate to share the information with who we're sharing it with? Right?
Mhm.
Those are some questions that sometimes we need to ask ourselves if we find that we are oversharing a lot.
Mhm.
Right? Why we feel that oversharing is a great thing. I think because in most cases it makes us feel like the other person really trusts us because we're sharing,
Mm.
oh, they're really open. Oh, they're telling me everything, right?
Right.
When in fact that can come back to bite us.
Yeah.
And come back to bite us.
Mm.
Yeah, sometimes too much information can be a bad thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed. Can you talk a little bit more about um, or give an example of a healthy emotional boundary? Like the plan, what you plan to do if that boundary is crossed. Can you give us an example of one?
Right. So emotional boundaries is being able to um, share what we need, how we need it, and then the other person expects, respects whatever that is. Just for an example, I might just say, okay, in a romantic relationship, being able to um, relay my need for feeling love, but being able to feel that in a way that makes me feel love.
Mhm.
Not necessarily how you feel like you want to give it to me, but what is it that I need to make me feel like my love tank is full, right?
Right.
That is being able to respect how I need to receive that for how love looks to me and not you packaging it for how you feel like, oh, this is how I know to give love and this is what I'm going to give it to you. So
Mhm.
it's respecting me in the fashion of what do I actually need? And if
Mm.
I need to express it in a certain way, it's okay because it's what I need,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Okay.
So if that boundary is crossed, if you talk to your partner
Mhm,
and tell them, hey, this is how I want my needs met,
mhm.
and they decide to do it still the same way they've always done it, how do you respond? How does somebody respond to that boundary crossing?
Okay. So this can be kind of tricky
Mhm.
because it's gonna be determined by the relationship for me.
Mhm.
So it'll be determined on how close is the relationship. Who are you to me? Is it in such a way that how you respect me and how you treat me and how you respond to me impacts how I move and how I feel? Then depending on the relationship, I may have a discussion. I may go ahead because I'm big on conversation.
Yeah.
I'm big on not just terminating any relationship
Yeah.
without, at least trying to have a conversation if it is in fact we're able to do so.
Right.
So if I'm able to bring it to somebody's attention and say, well, we've talked about this before. What is it you're not clear on as far as my expectation or my emotional needs and wants.
Mhm.
Do I need to clarify anything for you? And it seems that um, you're still continuing to deliver in your own way. So, what is it that we need to work on, or is there something I can clarify for you? So, I would personally allow the person an opportunity to explain the transaction or the behavior or the interaction first. Now, let's take it a step further. If I have the conversation
Mhm.
and you still are determined to do the thing that I asked you not to do,
Mhm.
then we're going to need to look at dissolving the relationship, or I'm going to need to figure out how you move from my front row to my balcony.
Mm. I love that.
Okay.
From the front row to my balcony.
Oh, yes, because we can seat people in our lives
Yes.
where they need to be. And that's a whole nother show.
Yes. Come
But,
on
but,
now.
but I need to at least point that out.
Yes.
We do not have to put up with and accept things that continually interrupt our peace,
Mhm.
right? But
Right.
that's a whole nother show. We're
That's a
not
whole
going to go
nother
into
show.
that.
That's good. Wow.
That's a whole nother show.
Almost dived in there.
Mhm.
Tell me more.
Yeah.
That's good. That is good. Thank you for that example. Um, I think that for myself, boundaries was a big thing because sometimes when you've gone through trauma,
Mhm. Mhm.
and how that shows up in your life
Mhm.
is lack of boundaries or the other extreme, rigid boundaries.
Right.
And so, well, as the porous boundaries.
Mhm.
So, how that shows up determines how, because sometimes you don't even know that somebody's treating you badly
Mhm.
or poorly because you don't even have any boundaries in place and you're not even sure what boundaries are and what that looks like. What do you say to somebody that just has never had boundaries before, don't know what they look like, but now is trying their best to set those boundaries because they're now on this healing journey and they recognize that, oh, I have very porous boundaries. Or rigid boundaries. What do you say to that person?
So I think we have to look at a couple things.
Mhm.
So the first thing I would say is to pay attention to any hooks or opposition,
Mhm.
because that can come up. And so in those situations, we may have the persons that we need to set the boundaries with.
Mhm.
They may come with a guilt trip
Mhm.
or play games of some type of compromise, or well, maybe we just need to just be friends if you feel that way. And so it's certain things and mind games that people will play to get you to try to back down on creating that boundary,
Yeah.
or make you feel bad about trying to set that boundary.
Right.
So first of all, we have to be aware that this will surface at
Mhm.
some point when we are needing to now set the boundaries. And so during that process of just doing the investigation work. And so when I'm saying that, I'm saying let's start looking for, as you said earlier, let's be proactive.
Mhm.
So being able to say, okay, well, what are my chances of this coming up against me?
Right.
Right? What's the chance of the person I need to set it with resurfacing with something that's going to try to lure me back into the situation? But not only being able to identify that scenario that could be a possibility or a hypothetical scenario, but now planning what's my response to that?
Right.
Having a response already ready to go because you already know the person is coming.
Mhm.
And so that is a helpful way to at least start planning to set the boundary, um, and to be ready for that. But here's another thing is when we are establishing boundaries, be careful that we don't start, we stop. We
Yeah.
start,
Yeah.
we stop.
Mhm.
Because then how can we expect the other person to really take us serious?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because now then we have a situation where when we try to come back and insert the boundary again, they're like, "Oh, whatever. You said that the last time.
Oh, yes.
Whatever." We're not even, yeah,
Not even going there.
yeah, right.
Yeah. Mhm.
What does that do? hits you like a ton of bricks. And
Mm.
now you feel like, where do we go now with this? So now we have to play. I'm not going to say play the game, but we have to now insert consistency.
Yes.
Consistency is the only thing that's going to break that mindset now. After we've hit the switch on and off, on and off, on and off. I mean, you have to ask yourself, do you even take yourself seriously at that point?
Yes.
Right? Am I really serious if I keep saying that, right?
Yeah. So when you say that, am I taking myself seriously?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that before you can even place a boundary in different relationships, there needs to be some type of consistency with yourself and boundaries.
Yes.
So how do you treat yourself? How do you treat your things? How do you treat your body, your mind, all of those things first?
That's right.
So that way, when you do begin setting boundaries for those around you,
right,
then you're already consistent because you've proven yourself to yourself. So now,
that's good.
yeah. So now you have something to kind of go back on. If I was able to do it for myself,
right,
you know, I should be able to do it for them. I've proven myself to be consistent in this thing. I can be consistent with you as well. That's good.
Yeah. Consistency in a lot of things in life brings about great results.
Okay.
Yeah.
Listen.
Yeah. And so also in setting healthy boundaries or trying to establish them, we don't need to try to do too many at one time.
Yes. Overwhelm yourself. Yes.
Ooh. So we'll get a list of 10 and we'll try to, this week we're going to do all 10.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Right.
No.
The building.
Yeah.
The building process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I would say is maybe make your list like we all have done. We all have had to set boundaries in different relationships, but maybe prioritize what are my top 3 that I must do. These are the 3 that's causing me the most stress. I need to get on these like right now.
Right.
Like right now. I would say work on those and also maybe start with a person that it may be easiest to insert the boundary with.
Nice.
Yeah. The person that you feel like it would be easy for them, like, I know they'll receive it. I just need to present it.
Right.
And then move forward and then go up the list.
I love that. Start with the person that's most easy.
Yeah. Because that'll also mentally prove to you that it can be done.
Yeah.
That it can be done.
And not to mention that it can be done, but the people that care about you the most will respect that.
Ooh, I love it. Respect and receive
it. Yes.
I love it. Yeah.
So the easiest person is probably the one who you know loves you and respects you already.
Yeah. You know, the interesting thing is we're so afraid to insert boundaries.
Yeah.
When in fact, the other person, in most cases, they're not even surprised when you come with it.
Right.
But people treat us how we allow.
That's right.
So the longer we allow it, the more it continues.
Right.
Yeah, so in most cases, people don't even fight back when you try to insert a boundary. They're just like, oh, okay, all right. And it shocks you.
Yeah.
It shocks you. I know for me, I've had to insert boundaries just in conversation. Now, I have certain friends and family members that we cannot talk about certain things. Like, it just will not go well. So in order to preserve the happiness and the peace in our relationships, we have an agreement that certain things we just will not discuss within the presence of each other. And it works well.
That's great.
It works well.
That is really, really good. That's a healthy relationship.
Yes.
Very healthy.
Yes.
And so as you were talking, I was thinking about like the flip side, the receiving end of someone being told a boundary, right? And how that person receives that boundary. Like thinking about, okay, we're friends. You come to me and you give me this boundary, this boundary. I know as a friend that you are on this healing journey. You're trying your best to kind of get your life in order. You're doing all these things because as friends, I'm going to know that about you, right?
Mhm.
And then you come because everybody is not on the same journey. You're healing, but I feel like I'm all right, you know?
Mhm.
So if I'm all right and you come and you give me a boundary, my reaction, my thoughts might be one of rejection, fear, overwhelmed, maybe. Like, how dare she? Because all these years of us being the way that we were, and then now you're giving me a boundary. So, like, what would you say to someone that is receiving that boundary from that person that they love? Like, what is a healthy response to someone's boundary? Do that make sense?
I think I need an example.
So, okay, like I said, we're friends,
Right.
and you come and you say,
Mhm.
well, like you said earlier,
Mhm.
Aaliyah, I love you and I respect you and, you're worth my time. But right now on these particular days, I can't talk because I need this amount of time to
Mhm.
do what I need to do.
Mhm.
And usually, it's like, that's the time you and I usually meet or whatever, or I should be able to, because you're my friend, I should be able to pick up the phone and call you anytime I want to, because that's how it's always been. And you've always been available to me. Now you're telling me from this time to this time, I can't call you.
Mhm.
Now I'm feeling some kind of way. I'm like, so now I'm arguing with you about the boundary that you just put in place. Like, how dare you? I've been able to talk to you
Mhm.
all this time. How, now I'm feeling some kind of way. I'm feeling
Access.
like,
Mhm.
you're cutting me off. Because you're healing or all you're doing. So I become, combative to that healing process or combative to that boundary that you've now set. So what I'm asking you is, what would be a proper response? Because now I'm triggered
Mhm.
because I'm feeling abandoned and
Right.
rejected by you giving me a boundary.
Mhm.
What would be a proper response to someone giving you a boundary?
Okay. So, it's gonna take me to a whole nother topic again.
I'm
So we're gonna have a lot of
sorry.
shows come out of this, which is good. So when we're talking about a healthy friendship,
Mhm.
I have to say or ask, do we have effective communication?
Mm.
Right? If we can effectively communicate and you my girl, you my homie, you my ace, you know me like you said you do, then I don't see why that should be any type of friction there.
Mm.
Now, on the other side of presenting that boundary to my bestie, I would make sure that I'm absolutely clear as to what is the point of the change. Because sometimes we'll present a change, but we might not clarify why. Okay.
Mhm.
So then we are leaving stuff open to assumption that, now we don't have time for the friendship, or now we can't talk about our day, or whatever the conversation was. But I think if it is appropriately presented, I don't think this is going to be a problem.
Mm.
But as the mature bestie, if you're feeling some type of way, here again, effective communication.
Right.
Well, I'm feeling some type of way because of what you've just stated. And then being able to explore that emotion with the friends
Mhm.
so that we can kind of hash out what's the problem here.
Right.
And for me to um, explain, why do I now need that time? I mean, honestly, with the time boundary, I'm due that space,
Mhm.
right? But you have to remember that sometimes we create these situations. So then it's our responsibility to help smooth it over and bring peace to it. It's almost like, here again, a pattern.
Mhm.
We've had a pattern that's been fine for years. Now all of a sudden you are snatching the rug from under my feet.
Mhm.
What's going on? Right?
Right.
So my response to what you're saying is, I think that it should just be clear expression of feelings,
Mhm.
clear communication on how both people are feeling, and then we always want to leave the situation, if possible,
Mhm.
with a solution.
Got it.
What does that look like? What does that look like?
Mm. That's good. So what I'm hearing you saying is the person that's on the other side that's receiving
Mhm.
the noun boundary
Mhm.
is that they should express or to communicate how they might be feeling about that situation so they can get better clarity to kind of help them understand and even help their friend enforce that boundary.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. Also, because when it comes to communication, you always want to be very clear on the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I fully understand what your expectation is, then perhaps we can come up with an even better solution.
Right.
And I can help you with your goals and your journey.
Right.
Because now I understand what your
you're
need
doing.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
What your need is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of things, Aaliyah, can be resolved with the proper communication. Communication. Yeah. But we cannot always feel that our need is number one,
Mm-hmm.
right? Without being considerate of what others may need in a relationship, in a friendship, in
Right.
any type of ship.
Yeah.
Any type of ship,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Got it.
Does that mean we need to forsake our peace because of what the other person needs? No.
No.
There's compromise in relationships.
All right.
All right. Also, so we want to jump back into real quick, just setting the boundaries also is breaking the boundaries. So if we feel like we need to break it up into smaller segments or smaller realistic boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So certain things we may need to break that up so we can make sure that it is executed well. Some things we may need to insert this month, and then we can add on in the next month, right?
Got it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Also being able to identify underlying vulnerabilities or issues that would stop us from being consistent. So here again, looking at what could be a barrier to me not being able to maintain the boundary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. As we are setting the boundaries, it's not always a smooth process,
No.
right? So I think we should talk a little bit about what can be a negative demotivator when we are trying to set those healthy boundaries. What are some things that can pop up and we'd be like, I ain't thinking about no boundary this week. I really don't care, whatever. What are some of those things that can interrupt that?
So if you are tired,
Yes.
exhausted,
Yes.
stressed out,
Mm-hmm.
hungry,
Mm-hmm.
when we are in physical pain,
Yep.
emotional pain, when we're depressed,
That's it.
I'm not thinking about a boundary at that point.
That's it.
Yeah. So those are definitely things that, that's when consistency,
That's it.
comes into play. When you're feeling a certain way or there's some things that are transpiring in your life, it is that consistency that begins to override how you might be feeling.
That's good. Yep. Consistency. And I would say it's sometimes good to always have an accountability partner too.
Oh, yes.
Be like, I got some friends that be like, girl, get yourself together. Like, no, ma'am.
Right.
Matter of fact, that's all they say is no, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
And we know what that means. And I'm like, all right, bet, got it.
Yeah.
Let's roll.
Yeah. That's true. And when no ma'am don't work, I need a friend that'll say, I'm coming over.
That's right.
Because it's been some times when I need you to come over.
That's right.
And snatch me up.
That's right. That's a great thing to have those kind of relationships.
Yes.
And we all need them.
Yes.
We all need them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In closing, what I would just say is healthy boundaries are necessary in healing and in building healthy, sustainable relationships.
Yes, ma'am.
Examine your life. I've done it. I think I do it almost every week to look and see what boundaries do I have in place? What boundaries do I need to put in place? And where do I fall? Am I rigid? Am I porous? Or am I healthy? Now, keep in mind that we can be all three. It just depends on our environment and who the person is. We can be rigid with coworkers, we can be porous with family, and we can be healthy with our spouses.
Mm,
So it can be a mixture. But at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that all boundaries are in fact healthy.
yes. The only thing that I would add to that is just, again, just reemphasizing that boundaries is not trying to control someone else,
Correct.
but it's all about you and
Mhm.
what plans you have to protect yourself.
Correct.
So, yeah. So what are you going to do if this boundary is crossed?
That's good.
Not what you're going to do to the other person.
That's correct. Yeah, look,
I
right.
just want to be clear about
Right.
that. Like,
Yeah.
you can't do anything to anybody else because you don't control them. You control you. So, what is your plan if that boundary is crossed? What are you going to do?
That's good. All right. Well, that concludes our session for today, and we will see you on the next episode.